Some of you know that I was born in England, and I lived in England until, the mid-'80s, and in the early 80s, around 81, 82, my aunt and uncle came and visited us in England, and I went to London, and then we went up to the north, and we went up to York and Manchester and into Scotland. And while we were staying in York, we stayed at a bed and breakfast. And it was run by this, I remember them very, very vividly, and it was run by this amazing family, and they had a son who was probably 16, 17, 18 years old, and he was kind of working as the bellhop, if you will, for this bed and breakfast. And so we all got settled in our individual rooms and such, and then as he was just about to say goodbye, he looked at my mom and he looked at my aunt, and he said to them, "Would you like me to knock you up in the morning?" Now, as American women, being knocked up is not necessarily the nicest thing that you can ask somebody, you know? And so it has a connotation of sort of being with child outside of wedlock, and maybe with some nefarious ways in which someone might have gotten pregnant. And being in the early 80s, and being that my mom and my aunt are good Southern women, this wasn't necessarily the nicest thing that you could have said to them, and so they had a look of perplexity on their face, of wondering what this young man was actually offering and propositioning them for. My father and my uncle had a slightly more disturbed look on their face, and the young man looked completely innocent. And so we found out that asking somebody if they would like to be knocked up in the morning in Great Britain, and I was told at the 8:30 service in Canada as well, means would you like to be woken up in the morning? It's kind of like a wake-up call. And so, context and timing and place is really important with what type of words you are using. They have different meanings in different places and different times. And context is very, very, very important. When I was in Montana, I used to always lead church camp, particularly with the 7th through 9th grade, the junior high kids. And I absolutely loved being with them. And I did it every single year I was in Montana. And so on Sunday evening, when we would do our opening bit in the mess hall, after they ate their very first meal, I'd do kind of the introductions of the camp. And I would go through all of the rules for the camp, and we would have a section on the rules when it came to language. And I would give them 2 scenarios. I said, scenario 1 is we are playing capture the flag, and your team wins, and you are the MVP of the capture the flag game. And you come running over to me after the game is over, and you go, "Daryl, that was the bleeping best game we ever played. We should play that bleeping every single day because I'm the bleeping best, yo." Or I hear you call somebody stupid and ugly. Which one of those 2 scenarios do you think I'm going to be upset about, and that we're going to use it as a teachable moment? And almost immediately, they recognize that even though all the bleepity bleeps are not necessarily the most appropriate words for camp, in the context of the children being excited and maybe reverting back to their their school hallway talk or their playground talk, I'm probably not going to be too upset about that, though I might ask them to maybe tone it down and maybe use different words. It's really the mean-spirited, the put-downs of calling someone mean, or calling someone ugly or stupid, which is truly the offensive language in this scenario. But of course, words are tough. And where we learn our learns, and the words that we use in our lexicon, in our everyday speak, and figuring out what is contextually appropriate, the time, the community, the people that we are around, all of those things change and evolve over time and in different places. Many of you know that I bought an amazing 1973 GMC 3/4-ton pickup. She's a beaut. And if you want to see her, she's right out there. She's mustard color. She is so freaking amazing. Now, if I told you I bought a 1973 GMC 3/4-ton pickup, and I said she's old, you might have one connotation and vision of what she looks like and what kind of condition she is in. But if I tell you that she's a classic, you might have a completely different understanding of the condition that she's in. And she is pristine. She's only got 44,000 miles. No, all right, never mind. This shirt is 13 years old. And I'm so proud that I can still get into it. But if I told you that I bought this shirt at a vintage clothing shop, you might have a slightly different understanding of the value of this shirt than if I told you that I bought this shirt at Goodwill. Words and language depend on context and timing and community. And words evolve and they change. Some words are taken out of the language. New words are added to the language. In the last decade, we've added to our common lexicon the word defriend. That wasn't a word 10 years ago. No one knew what that meant. How many of you know what the word defriend means? 95% of you know that on Facebook, you friend somebody, and then they get really obnoxious on their thread of what the things that they write, so you defriend them. You couldn't defriend someone before 2003. Now we have the word browser. That wasn't even a word 15 years ago. And then what kind of browser you use gives a whole different kind of connotation if you use Google versus if you use AOL. Because as soon as I say AOL, what's the first thing you hear in the back of your head? The modem. That modem dial-up. If I said the word cell, can you tell me what cell means? It depends on context, right? It depends on context and who you're talking to. If I'm talking to biologists or if I'm talking to my doctor, cells might mean red blood cells or white blood cells or platelets. If I'm talking to someone who is incarcerated and in prison, cell has a completely different meaning to it. If I talk to somebody who is talking about the contraption which fits in the back of their pocket, which has a computer inside of it, which is more powerful than what we sent the Apollo 11 astronauts up to the moon with, those brave souls that we sent them up in a trash can with a lamp. Cell has a completely different connotation. If I ask you what the definition of the word peruse is, you would say it means to read thoroughly and completely, right? Which is the actual definition of the word if you look it up at the Oxford American Dictionary. But how do we actually use the word peruse? It means to skim or to glance at. So words change and evolve. Benjamin Franklin absolutely hated that the American English-speaking public butchered the word balcony. It was offensive to him that people wanted to go to the theater and sit in the balcony because we all know the word is balcony. He wrote a whole essay in the Boston newspaper about how the American colonies is butchering and destroying the English language. And yet all of us know the best place to see a play is in the balcony. And then, of course, there is the word gay. Gay has evolved and changed over so much time. One of our favorite Christmas carols has the beautiful line, "Deck the halls." Deck the Halls has the beautiful line that we're all going to wear our gay apparel, which means festive and joyful. I read so many Sir Arthur Conan Doyle books or D.H. Lawrence books, and there's so many times that the word gay is in there, as well as another word we'll get to in a moment. But then, of course, gay started to become the word that was appropriated by the male homosexual community as to sort of define those men who fell in love with and found attractive people of the same gender. But then it started to be expanded to understand the entire LGBTQ community. But then as people who were attracted to and fell in love with people of the same gender, as well as those people who have different gender identities than the one that they were born with, started to expand in human rights and acceptability here in the United States, there was a backlash in the mid-2000s of the word gay, where the culture pushed back on the use of the word gay now to mean stupid or idiotic. And there was this whole public sort of mission to get rid of that usage of the word. And it was led by teachers and counselors and our young people to teach people like me that the use of that term in that way was not acceptable. But then the gay community expanded, and it no longer meant just the male homosexual community, but it meant the entire community, LGBT, and then now we've added Q and I and others to that umbrella of that alphabet to understand and represent so many people. But that began to become too long, and it was hard to understand and remember. And so that community reappropriated a word that many of you probably found offensive when you were young. The word is queer. Now, when I was a kid, we played a game called Smear the Queer. And it was kind of like rugby or an unsanctioned football game where one person with a ball ran away from 5, 10, 15, 20 other people, and the idea was to tackle that person. It's a violent game. I can't tell you how many times I walked away from that game bloodied and bruised. And it wasn't until I got older that I realized the symbolism of the name of that game. Because queer in the 30s, 40s, 50s didn't just mean different or odd, but it came to be known in terms of male identity as one of the worst names that a male could be called in that generation, which is sissy. You were a sissy. And we were going to get that sissy, and we were going to pound that sissy into the ground. That's the game that I was taught to play on the playground of my elementary school. But queer has started to have, and to not be a term of derision or a slur, but become a term of empowerment. It's been reclaimed by the LGBTQ community, and it's replaced that pantheon of letters, that umbrella of letters. When I was in high school, we didn't even have a gay-straight alliance. The closest thing we had to a gay-straight alliance was called theater. But now we've moved from theater to gay-straight alliances to queer student alliances. And when I was I was invited to speak at a panel at the Queer Student Alliance up at San Diego State University. And there were 10 of us on this panel, which is way too many for a panel, but that's okay. And we all represented different faith communities. And we started on the left with the atheist, and we ended up on the right with the Christian Protestant. And we were asked to identify ourselves and to introduce ourselves by saying what our name was, what our tradition was, what our gender identification was, and what our preferred pronouns were. How many of you have been to a conference where now on your name tag you have your preferred pronouns? It's coming. Get ready. Your next professional conferences this will be part of your name tags. So we started with and I'm just going to call her Diane. And Diane started by saying, my name is Diane, I'm an atheist, I'm a pansexual, but I am more attracted to women than I am men. So I guess I'm a lesbian-leaning pansexual. I'm a cisgendered woman, and my preferred pronouns are him, are she, and her. How many times I've just said a lot of words. How many of those words were new to you? Yes, pansexual, cisgendered, preferred pronouns. I knew a lot of what those words mean in isolation, but together I was confused. And each one of those came down all the way till we got to me on this end. So by the time I had to introduce myself, I was so confused, I actually introduced myself by saying, my name is Daryl? But queer has been reclaimed, and now if you go to college, you can study queer theory. You can go to the library, and there's a section called queer literature. You can go down to Hillcrest to the Landmark Theater during the fall, and there's a queer cinema festival. Of course, there's still the queer community that is one of empowerment that has reclaimed that term of derision and that slur, and it's been changed, and it's empowered people now all of these years. There are words that we long to hear in our lives, that we just wait to hear. Words like, I love you, and there's a new Star Wars movie coming out. There's words that we absolutely fear hearing. There's a spider in the house. And maybe the worst of all, we need to talk. There's words that we hope that never come across our purview, like cancer. And then when we hear that word, we are dying to hear another word, which means that it will make it all better. Remission. Words have power. Words have meaning. The thing you learned as a child that sticks and stones may break your bones, but words will never hurt you, is one of the most bold-faced lies we've ever told our children. Because I have recovered from so many injuries, broken bones, surgery on my back, so much quicker than I have the bruises upon my hearts and the scars upon my souls. All of which were caused by words. Malfoy in the clip uses a horrible slur to describe Hermione. But let us not be too hard on Malfoy because he's only 13 years old. So where did he learn to use that term? His parents, his community, dare I say his church. And no, Hermione didn't need Ron coming to her defense, obviously. But there may come a time where Hermione reclaims Mudblood like the queer community has queer, and she might decide to start a club called the MFP, or the FPMs, the family, the parents and friends of Mudbloods. Or she might start an all hip hop group of Mudbloods, and they might be called MWA, Mudbloods with Attitude. And they might start using that term as a one of endearment and empowerment and really change the culture, because people can change, like Mark said, because even in the Harry Potter universe, by the time we get to book 7, Draco Malfoy has changed. He's evolved from maybe not Hermione will ever be necessarily his best friend, but he's come to respect her and honor her and know her and call her a colleague and really know that she's someone who's very special, who has a great deal of ability and no longer defined just by who her parents and her blood is. But the way that he changed was by mentors and a community and experiencing a Mudblood in real, authentic ways of integrity. And sometimes that takes a vast, long period of time and a great, gracious, and patient community to mold and shape him. And the church can be that. At our best, the church can be a community where people have their ideas and their understanding of other folks changed and evolved. So whether we all see ourselves as created in God's beautiful image and blessed to be very good. You don't believe me? Let me tell you the story of Cody. Cody worked as a cowboy all of his life in Miles City, Montana, where, let me tell you, there was barely a theater, let alone a gay, straight, or queer student alliance. And we voted to become an open and affirming congregation in 2002. I have our open and affirming statement here. That's 8 years before Kensington Community Church became an open and affirming congregation on the plains of eastern Montana. And Cody was one of those members who voted against becoming an open and affirming congregation because he did not want those homosexuals in his church. But even though Cody lost the vote, he did not leave the congregation. He stayed. And in 3 years' period of time, I was having dinner at Cody's house one evening, and he started talking, as the conversation turned to church, he started talking about how he's really gotten to know Dixie and Tony, a lesbian couple who has started coming to our church after our vote to become an open and affirming congregation. And he said to me, Daryl, as he leaned back into his chair, you know, Daryl, I'm never really going to understand that gay bleep. And then he leaned into the table. He's like, but I really love Dixie and Tony. They've become such an amazing part of our church. They do so much work, and they teach our children Sunday school. They sit on our boards. They do so much more work than people know. They're great. They're funny. I love that they're here. He's like, I don't know if I'm ever going to get it, but I'm glad that they're part of our church. And I hope they know if they ever need anything, they can call me, and that they know that they are part of my church family. And I leaned into Cody and I said, Cody, that's the gayest thing I've ever heard you say. Because to the gay community, family's really important. But if Cody didn't have a community that would allow him to be himself and to patiently, gingerly, maybe even poking and prodding him a little bit, but allowing him to do the work on his own time, he might not have changed. He might not have had that Jesus moment that we see in our scriptures where the Syrophoenician woman holds a sacred mirror up to Jesus and says, I am not your dog. I'm a woman in need of your assistance. And Jesus could have done that thing that so many of us do when someone holds a sacred mirror up to us. We could have blamed them, told them to get a sense of humor, not to be one of those PC police people. But he really heard her and valued her. And in a moment, he had an epiphany, and he changed. And his heart went from the very worst of his human side to the very best of his divine side, and he helped that woman with her need and valued her as a sister in the family of God. So whether we have an epiphany or whether we take some time, we all have a mirror that we need lifted up to our face, that we can look at with some integrity and authenticity and really look deep into our hearts. Who are the mudbloods? Who are the dogs? Who are those people that we other and we devalue? And what work do we need to do to truly live into who God calls us to be? And as an open and affirming church, we claim that we are. Let us be brave. Let us be courageous. Let us be honest, so that we may live into our best Christ-like self and stare into our mirrors until that time, until we see Christ staring back at us and Christ in the face of all we see. That is the good news this day, sisters and brothers. Happy Pride. Amen.